In the face of a surging outbreak and widespread protests against its zero-COVID regime of lockdowns and testing, China began dismantling it this month, becoming the last major country to move towards living with the virus. Its containment measures had slowed the economy to its lowest growth rate in nearly half a century, jamming global supply chains and trade. As Chinese workers increasingly fall ill, more disruption is expected in the short term before the economy bounces back later next year. China reported less than 4,000 new symptomatic local COVID cases nationwide for December 22, and no new COVID deaths for a third consecutive day. Authorities have narrowed the criteria for COVID deaths, prompting criticism from many disease experts. Jiang Wening, director of the National Center for Infectious Diseases, was quoted in Shanghai government-backed news outlet The Paper on Thursday as saying China is expected to reach the peak of infections within a week. The peak infection will also increase the rate of severe disease, which will have a certain impact on our entire medical resources, he said, adding the wave will last another 1 or 2 months after that. We must be mentally prepared that infection is inevitable. Nevertheless, Zhang said he had visited nursing homes around Shanghai, noticing the number of elderly dealing with severe symptoms was low. Nearly 37 million people in China may have been infected with COVID-19 on a single day this week, Bloomberg News reported on Friday, citing estimates from the government's top health authority. Worries over the near-term impact of China's COVID wave pushed stock markets in China, Hong Kong and elsewhere in Asia lower. The yuan also weakened. Infections in China are likely to be more than 1 million a day, with deaths at more than 5,000 a day, a stark contrast from official data, British-based health data firm Airfinity said this week. A Shanghai hospital has estimated half of the commercial hub's 25 million people would get infected by the end of next week. Experts say China could face more than 1 million COVID deaths next year. Cities continue to ease rules. Shanghai said people who had tested positive will be allowed to end home isolation after 7 days if their symptoms significantly abate or end, without mentioning the need to undertake more tests. The guidance from earlier this month had said they could end home isolation after testing negative on antigen and PCR tests. China's abrupt change in policy caught a fragile health system unprepared, with hospitals scrambling for beds and blood, pharmacies for drugs and authorities racing to build clinics. A drive to vaccinate the elderly that began 3 weeks ago has yet to bear fruit. China's overall vaccination rate is above 90%, but the rate for adults who have had booster shots drops to 57.9%, and to 42.3% for people aged 80 and older, according to government data. China spent big on quarantine and testing facilities over the past 3 years rather than bolstering hospitals and clinics and training medical staff, these people said. There is an incredible lack of preparation for the virus coming despite them having ample warning, said Liang Ho Nam, an infectious diseases doctor at Rofi Clinic in Singapore. China's National Health Commission did not respond to requests for comment on the criticisms. The country has 9 domestically developed COVID shots approved for use, all seen as less effective than Western-made vaccines that use the new mRNA technology. A shipment of 11,500 BioNTech mRNA vaccines for German nationals in China have arrived at the German embassy in Beijing, an embassy spokesperson told Reuters on Friday. The embassy hopes the first doses will be given out as soon as possible, the spokesperson said. The World Health Organization has received no data from China on new COVID hospitalizations since Beijing lifted its zero-COVID policy. The WHO has said gaps in data might be due to Chinese authorities simply struggling to tally cases. Amid mounting doubts about Beijing's statistics, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Thursday said all countries, including China, need to share information on their experiences with COVID. As COVID rages through China, residents who previously faced long periods of isolation are now learning to live with the virus. Chinese teacher Yang Zhengdong, whose whole family is isolating in their downtown Shanghai apartment, mildly ill with COVID, welcomes the change in policy. Only weeks ago, they would have all been sent to a quarantine facility, and their building would have been locked down. When I think of this situation, my feeling is just, wow, we are so lucky because now we can isolate at home, Yang said. This wave is something we have to face, because it is impossible to stay closed forever.
Facebook parent Meta to settle Cambridge Analytica case for $725 million. The proposed settlement, which was disclosed in a court filing late on Thursday, would resolve a long-running lawsuit prompted by revelations in 2018 that Facebook had allowed the British political consulting firm Cambridge Analytica to access data of as many as 87 million users. Lawyers for the plaintiffs called the proposed settlement the largest to ever be achieved in a U.S. data privacy class action and the most that Meta has ever paid to resolve a class action lawsuit. This historic settlement will provide meaningful relief to the class in this complex and novel privacy case, the lead lawyers for the plaintiffs, Derek Lozer and Leslie Weaver, said in a joint statement. Meta did not admit wrongdoing as part of the settlement, which is subject to the approval of a federal judge in San Francisco. The company said in a statement settling was, in the best interest of our community and shareholders. Over the last 3 years we revamped our approach to privacy and implemented a comprehensive privacy program, Meta said. Cambridge Analytica, now defunct, worked for Donald Trump's successful presidential campaign in 2016, and gained access to the personal information from millions of Facebook accounts for the purposes of voter profiling and targeting. Cambridge Analytica obtained that information without users' consent from a researcher who had been allowed by Facebook to deploy an app on its social media network that harvested data from millions of its users. The ensuing Cambridge Analytica scandal fueled government investigations into its privacy practices, lawsuits and a high-profile U.S. congressional hearing where Meta chief executive Mark Zuckerberg was grilled by lawmakers. In 2019, Facebook agreed to pay $5 billion to resolve a Federal Trade Commission probe into its privacy practices and $100 million to settle U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission claims that it misled investors about the misuse of users' data. The users' lawyers alleged that Facebook misled them into thinking they could keep control over personal data, when in fact it let thousands of preferred outsiders gain access. Facebook argued its users have no legitimate privacy interest in information they shared with friends on social media. But U.S. District Judge Vince Chhabria called that view so wrong, and in 2019 largely allowed the case to move forward.
Paris shooting. 3 dead and several injured in attack. A gunman has opened fire in central Paris, killing 3 people and wounding 3 others. Witnesses said the attacker targeted a Kurdish community center and restaurant, and prosecutors said they would look into a possible racist motive. A suspect, aged 69, was quickly arrested and it soon emerged he had been freed from prison recently. Authorities appealed for people to avoid the area in Strasbourg-Saint-Denis in the 10th district of Paris. There is no confirmed motive for the shooting, but Paris prosecutor Laure Becqueux confirmed that the suspect had previously been charged with racist violence. It was not clear why he had recently been released. Local Mayor Alexandre Courtebard said the suspect was also wounded in the shooting and that 3 places had come under fire. 2 people were shot in the salon. Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo said the murders had been committed by a far-right activist. She added, "Kurds wherever they reside must be able to live in peace and security." More than ever, Paris is by their side in these dark times. We were walking in the street and heard gunshots, a witness, Ali Dalek, told the BBC. We turned around and saw people running left and right. And then, 5 or 6 minutes later, because we know people who work at the hair salon, we went in and we saw that they had arrested a guy, an old man, elderly, tall. Another witness, a shopkeeper, told AFP she had locked herself in. She said she had heard 7 or 8 bursts of gunfire. 2 of those wounded in the shooting are said to be in a critical condition and 2 others were seriously injured. Police detained the suspect without resistance and reportedly recovered the weapon used in the attack. Prosecutors said they had opened a murder investigation. Ms. Hidalgo praised police for their decisive action. The attack took place almost 10 years after the murder of 3 Kurdish women in Paris in January 2013. The street close to Château d'Eau metro station has several restaurants and shops, as well as the cultural center. Ms. Cordebard said it was a very lively area. Another witness said the street was now full of emergency services and they were waiting to be able to leave. Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin said he was heading to Paris to visit the scene of the dramatic shooting, adding that his thoughts were with the victims' friends and family.